Hey everyone, Isaiah McPeak here, debate coach by night, tech entrepreneur by day. Today I'd like to talk about using the Bible in debate rounds. At a recent tournament, a mother approached me with what I've heard several times before as an unspoken rule inside of Stoa and NCFCA homeschool debate circles, which is that we don't use the Bible in debate rounds. I disagree with that unspoken rule pretty strongly, and I wanted to share some stories and experience to help you see why. The first place I'd like to start is with a couple stories from secular debate. So I've actually participated as a debater or coach in about 11 different leagues, and I think run tournaments in maybe 6 or 7 over the college and high school, all kinds of different formats and styles. One of the most memorable experiences I had was when the Grove City College debate team faced the Patrick Henry College debate team in finals in a National Parliamentary Debate Association NPDA Parley tournament. And so you had 2 Christian schools in a secular league going head to head. So the resolution for that round was that this house would rise up and overthrow its government. Now, putting aside that probably isn't a very good topic, what happened is that Patrick Henry, to my chagrin, the team that was in finals ran a case saying that the people of the United States should rise up and overthrow their government because of abortion. And until abortion is no longer allowed, that's why we're rising up and overthrowing, something like that. It was pretty weak, but that was what they went with. Now, the other team, who was from a Christian school and actually from a NCFCA homeschool debate background, on stage cried real tears because she felt like she'd been put in a position to argue for abortion. So what did the secular judges think? Well, they actually ended up voting for the negative team, but not because of the argument that they were put in an unfair position. And it was a split decision, and what was interesting was all of the judges gave the same comment. You could have run a counter plan to just illegalize abortion, and then you wouldn't have to rise up and overthrow the government to do it. And there's a pretty solid disadvantage there to be had of why rising up and overthrowing the government, the resolution, is probably not the best way to handle the issue of abortion. I've got lots of stories like that from high school debaters who are trying to illegalize abortion by calling it medical malpractice year. That was NCFCA 2005, 2006, or I think, and to all kinds of college leagues. There's a college league called NCCFI. It's not really a league, it's a tournament. The National Christian Forensics Communications Invitational, I think, is what NCCFI stands for. And it's basically it's called Christian Nationals, is what they call it in college debate. And I remember them having resolutions like the United States should adopt a principle of Jubilee economics from Leviticus 17, or all kinds of kind of biblical interpretation topics. We hosted a tournament at Patrick Henry College once that was purely on theological topics for debate. And last of all, my partner and I in NPDA college debate, secular environment again, very secular, we had a standard argument where we would use as a weighing mechanism some idea of morality. And probably 6 times out of 10, our opponents would say, well, you can't choose a morality because, that's too subjective of a choice, and every different person has a different view of morality. To which we would come back with, well, then that deletes the idea of there being words like good and bad. If there's no moral charge, you have to point to a higher authority, to a supernatural power. Now, lots of people thought, oh, you're going to lose that argument. You're in a secular environment. But the idea was that we actually didn't. We came to a point where we were succeeding with that argument regularly with secular judges judging us, because we tried to overcome how to speak about a difficult issue. I say all those stories to say this. If in the Christian homeschool league, we don't learn to talk about what's most important to us, when are we going to learn? I have a couple notes here that I wanted to go over. What if someone slanders your character in a meeting? How do you handle that? What if someone tries to advocate that God would want us to eradicate all Muslims or have a civil war or something else like that? Or what if someone said it would be really good for the children if we kidnapped babies in poor countries and brought them to the United States where they could have a better life? Now, in all of these cases, I think we can see, well, actually, if we were having this as a normal discussion, we would say that's not what the Bible says, or that's not really a correct interpretation, or it shouldn't be applied that way this time. And we'd start to use the basic skill that debate teaches us, which is to break a large problem into parts, analyze the parts, and attack one. That's why we learn things like stock issues, how to divide deliberative oratory into 4 different components so that you can agree that babies dying is bad, but disagree that this plan or solution is the right way to deal with it. It's compartmentalization or critical thinking. What's fascinating to me is that we're willing to allow that in all kinds of different cases, but for some reason, many people, I think just because they haven't thought it all the way through, have decided that when it comes to the Bible, I would be against the Bible in a debate round if somebody used the Bible. But that's not really the case. Because if somebody says that God would want rehabilitation over retribution, well, there's some really good biblical arguments on both sides of that to probably be able to say, I don't know that God really would choose one side or the other of this resolution. It's probably a human decision. Or take another topic, China foreign policy. Okay, let's skip that one. That's difficult, I think, to even draw a biblical argument from. But let's take public needs versus private property rights, the Stoa LD topic this year. If someone said that, God is for private property and individual rights, well, there's a really interesting argument to be had that look at Joseph. He established a communist Egypt. He helped, first of all, tax all the people, lots and lots, so that they gave all their grain into the government. And then over the period of the famine, when people were out of food, sold it back to them for the right to work their land, which they had to sell their land to the government. I'm not saying that's good or bad. All that I'm saying is that when you look through biblical history and see theocracy, you see aristocracy, you see monarchy, you see all kinds of different governments, something sort of like a communism. Like, you see all these different things. There's a rich territory of soil to talk about. And if we spend 3 of our high school years, the sophomore, junior, and senior years, arguing about issues that are important, but setting aside what matters most to us, I think we're doing a huge disservice. Learning to analyze these things well so that when you get to college and somebody says that God, Christians want to kill all Muslims, you have something intelligent to say and you know how to handle it. So I'll give you an example. This year, my local club is doing NCFCA LD, which is about rehabilitation and retribution. And because we've opened the Bible and we're looking at N.T. Wright in his book, Surprised by Hope, his concept, he says God has a different concept of justice that has to do with setting things right in the world and setting the captive free and so on. We've looked at historical examples of whether an eye for an eye holds true. And Jesus says, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye. And then also, we found out something new. Everybody's learned that lex talionis, the concept of eye for an eye and tooth for tooth, was actually a concept of mercy. Biblical scholars agree that what was happening before was if somebody did something unjust to you, then you kind of vigilante justice took it out on them. Family feud, full on, really hurt somebody who maybe had just stolen something. And so God's law at the time was actually a restraint, not what we view it as today as, that's kind of cruel, an eye for an eye. And so lex talionis was, you can't take from someone more than the pain that they inflicted on you. Again, please, I'm just trying to give you very quick examples. Don't judge me for whether I've explained the full biblical theology or anything like that. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that if we shut our ears to that because we're not willing to apply the very debate skill of seeking the deepest reasons for why and parsing them out and using critical thinking, then I think we're doing a massive disservice to ourselves and to our mission of equipping future Christians to talk about God's word in the public domain. If all of a sudden somebody says that God said we should do X at our company in a meeting, and you throw your hands up in the air and say, I don't talk about that. I only talk about God when nobody can reply, like in my apologetics speeches or my Mars Hill speeches, or I cry on a public stage because somebody said something about abortion and I've shut down my critical thinking rather than being able to bob and weave and find the deep crux of the matter, then we're not really learning everything that debate has to offer. So I understand the concern that someone just says, well, God's on my side, and that would be the end of the debate round. But I think that that's kind of like over-prepping the case. The debate round unfolds over a series of back and forth positions, and many times debaters who have a perfect case lose the round because they can't sustain it. And I think in this case, while the argument may seem persuasive that, I couldn't argue against the Bible, when you really break it down and think about it, you actually can argue that the Bible doesn't say that, it says something else, or it shouldn't be applied here in this way, and that learning to speak that way is one of the greatest gifts that we can give our young people as they're maturing and learning to talk about God and apply their Christian worldview to real life issues like foreign policy with China, food, agriculture, leadership issues, private property, public needs, and all these things. We should give the gift of being able to speak about what's most important, and that the Christian homeschool leagues are the one place where that seems sort of taboo to do it, and yet you could do it in a secular environment seems extremely backwards. So I hope you reconsider your position if you thought this was an unwritten rule before, and embrace the concept that over the course of a year, your student might be able to say, what is really the Christian answer to balancing rehabilitation and retribution? Is God an eyeball with a hammer? Or is there a merciful side and a sacrificial side? And how does that relate to government? That is such a complex and rich discussion worth exploring. I hope you don't turn it off, but instead turn it on. So I leave you with this. If in the high school forensics worlds you don't get to have debates about your worldview and how it applies, where will that happen?